And this particular record, it showed that he sold his children to pay for his taxes. And
Ugh.
I was just like, Lord, I was like,
Such horrible times, you
exactly.
know?
And I'm going, am I reading what I'm reading here? You have no idea it took me many months to reconcile that, to know that he sold his children. For me to read that, and I had
Oh
to
my
go,
God.
okay, remember, Wendy, this is what they had to do at that time.
Mhm.
As horrible as you are reading this is what they did.
Hey friends, welcome to Tradition Café, the spot where the past bumps into the present and we get to sip our favorite drinks while digging into the stories that make people, well, people. I'm Anna Xavier, your host, curious and totally here for the fun of learning about people's lives. In each episode, we'll celebrate heritage, family, and community, whether it's immigrants, the generations that came after them, or chosen families that make life messy, interesting, and unforgettable. So if you're like me, inquisitive, a little nosy, and love a good story, pull up a chair, grab your cup, and thanks for listening.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Tradition Café. I'm Anna, your host. You probably gathered that. Today I'm here with Wendy Aris, my new friend she hosts her own podcast called Disafemi History Podcast. And you can find it everywhere, pretty much everywhere. And it is based mainly, and please clear this up for me if I'm saying it wrong, Caribbean history, family history, heritage, all that stuff. Hi, Wendy. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast,
Yes.
Tradition Cafe. This is an honor, and I know we talk a lot outside of just the recording, but no, I just want to thank you so much for having me on your podcast and
Thank you.
being able to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you because, I've already said this to you a million times, but I'm gonna say it on my podcast.
Okay.
Yours is one of my favorites, and I think it's because it hits me so personally, because I am Caribbean, and
Uh-huh.
I just started doing my family history, the digging around, so it's very exciting. So we're gonna definitely hit on your podcast later, and you just came out with a book, and we're gonna hit on that later. But right now, just tell my listeners a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and uh, anything.
I'm from Canada. I'm here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I was born in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. And yeah, and as you said, I have a podcast called Disafemi History, which is in the Jamaican language, or patois, as they say, meaning in English, it's called This Is My History. And I did it that way to make it that people can be kind of proud of their history and know that they have a history, because in the Caribbean, this is not a history that's well known, so to
Oh,
speak, right? And it overrides I guess, the Hollywood version of
mhm,
everything where, oh yeah, that's what it was. That was history. But when you are researching your family
mhm.
history, you come to realize that this is way more peels of the onion than you would have ever expected or to have known. And as you mentioned, I do have an upcoming book coming out called The Emotions of Researching Your Family Tree.
Mhm.
And yeah, we'll get to that
Yeah.
as to the reasoning why. But I've been researching pretty much my family tree for the last 18 years.
What made you start that? What made you start looking into your family history? Was it just born from curiosity, or what?
Let's just say it's a two-parter. So I did start, uh, you know, probably in my 20s, but I only looked at my mother's line and didn't get very far with a lot of information that I had at the time. And the second time, which became the more of, I guess, the one that really charged all of this, was a meeting with the family doctor, because I do take care of my brother. I'm his caregiver, his substitute decision maker. So, and the doctor said, yeah, Wendy, you know what? You've told me all that you've told me about what is on the maternal line. Now I need you to tell me what's on the paternal side. So going home and thinking about that, I mean, that was quite the offload. Yes, he was going to do what he needed to do as a physician, but to have that, family history information.
So how much did you know going in?
When I decided then to research and to look to find, I didn't know I didn't know a lot because we didn't grow up with our father. So I didn't know anything. And in many ways, that was a blessing in disguise, to be quite honest. To not have that, you have a complete blank slate. That's how I looked at it. And then to find out, well, where do I get these records? Where I'm in Canada, I didn't have the time at that point to just say, oh, yeah, let me just go fly down to Jamaica like it's nothing. I then had to figure out, okay, where can I find these records? I've eventually got linked to the Mormon Church. And
Okay.
of course, the Mormon Church, this is part of their religion, of everybody knowing their family history. So they have what are called family history centers. So these are centers where they have actual films where I don't know how they got the authorization to go
Uh,
to every country in the world practically and film birth, death, and marriage records. And from the time of being in those countries up until a certain point.
okay.
So you're looking at the Mormon Church will only for birth records up until 1930. So marriage records up until 1950
Okay.
and death records up until 1995-ish. I'm
Oh. And you've been researching this for, did you say 16 years?
about 18
Wow.
years.
Wow.
Mm.
So how far back in your family history have you gotten?
I've gotten back to the 1700s. So the 1740s is where I've gotten back to. And that takes me to the African ancestor.
Okay.
And
Oh,
that takes me
wow.
to
So
the
your
African.
family's been in Jamaica since the 1700s. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, how much do you know about the ancestor?
For that one, I'm just learning about her
Okay.
and which part she's from. And my next trip to Jamaica, I'm hoping to be able to at least hopefully be able to uncover, let's say, which shipping record that she may be hopefully attached to.
Yeah, I wonder how you'll find that. I mean, I
You just go, well, I'll go to the archives and
in
to see
Jamaica?
in Jamaica
Okay.
and to be able to see what they have there because yeah, there's silences and this particular line actually from the birth of that child and up until my parents would be 7 generations in Jamaica, which covers well over 250 years of history.
So the African ancestor that we are talking about right now, is that maternal or paternal?
Paternal.
Okay. All right.
Paternal.
So since you went into it, as you said, kind of like a blank slate, um, do you feel like it was all surprising, or were there some aspects that surprised you that didn't match what you thought you were going to find?
I had no reference point of anybody's stories to kind of
Okay.
go by. I had nobody's um, inferences or what they thought, so to speak. Yes, I knew on my mother's side, I knew of stories, and that guided me. However, on the paternal side, I didn't have anything.
Okay.
And I, and again, going back to the reasoning as to why I started this, because for medical reasons. And I was able to get to the great grandfather who I then was able to learn that he died of a rare condition called pernicious anemia. And with that information, then I was able to give to the family physician. And that ended up being the catalyst for a lot of things because this particular condition, pernicious anemia, it's an autoimmune condition where the body cannot absorb enough B12, and it's due to a lack of the intrinsic factor, leading to a deficiency, of course, in the low red blood count,
Mhm.
and of course, neurological issues as well. So once I got to there, I mean, I could have stopped because that's what the ask was.
Right.
But then I just decided to say, hey, I was able to get to this point really quickly and
Yeah.
find all this information, and start mapping, as morbid as that may be, mapping all of the people that had passed and providing more other information to the physician so he can be able to do whatever, guide him in whatever test, and of course referrals. And that's the other thing. Once we were referred to the neurologist, and of course you go to any type of specialist, they give you an intake form to fill out, to complete, and then they ask, oh yeah, what, does your family have blah, blah, blah condition? Well,
Right.
on the intake one, the first question was, of all the conditions, was pernicious anemia, which blew my mind
Is
because
that
I
like
wasn't expecting that.
is that like a common thing in the Caribbean or maybe Jamaica,
It's
even in the
not.
genetic line?
It's not. It's this isn't something that's common. It's rare,
Yeah, yeah.
but it has ramifications. So even though this is a great-grandfather, he had 20 kids. And of course, those 20 kids are all going to have kids.
Mhm.
And then, of course, you start seeing things come through the generations. Like, I met with grandchildren of this great-grandfather, and of course, that was their grandfather. They ended up having pernicious anemia, but they didn't know that there was a familiar link until I told them. So after all of that and seeing the power just of finding that information, I said, okay, Wendy, let's challenge I decided, hey, let's challenge yourself. However, before even doing that challenge, I then had to kind of sit with myself knowing that the time period that I'm going to be researching, the area that I'm going to be
Yeah.
researching, it's always told as the darkness, so to speak, because the time frame period was slavery. Not that that is the only part of our history, but it's a major part of the history. So again, not having a template to go by on the paternal side, but as well trying to take away any preconceived notions and of course any thoughts that I have currently and applying it to that time frame period, because I have no idea
Yeah.
what life looked like for someone in 1880s as opposed
Right.
to modern days where we have a microwave, a washing machine. I'm sure they
Well,
probably hired somebody to do their washing. You know what I mean?
right, right. And also what we learn in textbooks
Mhm.
may not be,
And
the actual history. So when you did your research or when you started delving more deep into the topics and people, what were your methods? In the beginning, you always hear church records,
mhm.
uh, birth, marriage, and death records. Was that your starting point?
Yeah, 'cause,
Mm,
once I was able to get to the Family History Center with the Mormon Church,
mhm.
I was very fortunate in the sense that this particular branch that I went to, somebody had already done research on Jamaica, and they bought all the films, so it was there left for everybody else to access it, and it was 2 rows, so that was about almost 200 films available. The way that it works with the Mormon Church is if you want a film to be used, you had to purchase it, and then it would get transferred to that family history. And it stayed there at that family history center unless you decided you wanted to, have it at your own home type of thing.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
you had that option, but this person did the option of having it at this family history center, so I hit the jackpot, so to
That's
speak.
generous. Oh, yeah. I wonder how many people get that luck.
You
Probably.
don't. You
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 don't. You don't.
you don't. You don't. I mean, there's in Toronto here in the Toronto area, there's at least 4 or yeah, there's 4 different family history centers. I've been to the 2 others, and they don't have anywhere near the type of records to the family history center that I went to in Brampton.
I just find it so interesting that they would have so much on Caribbean history.
They have it for the whole world. The whole world. I
Because
don't
in
know how.
Caribbean, because in the Caribbean, it's like uh, when you think about oral histories, uh, they're not always going to match up with the truth. I think that people tell
Exactly.
the oral history that they want to hear, that they want to pass on. So,
Exactly.
in finding the truth, it's amazing that you could go to the Mormon church as opposed to Jamaican archives. Have you had a lot of luck there?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the Mormon church?
No, in
Absolutely.
Jamaica.
In Jamaica, yes,
Oh,
absolutely, absolutely. Like, when I would say that the Mormon church gave you kind of like a template on how to research, right?
oh,
So you get used to going in, signing in, getting the film, going to your little unit and hooking up the film and sitting there for hours, because it does take some hours to
that
go
sounds
through one
fun.
film, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of information that's on there. And you're not going through it very quickly because you don't know when your person that you're looking for is going to pop up on the screen.
It's not in
So you just,
alphabetical order.
and it's not in alphabetical order either, but it gave you a good solid foundation in terms of how to look at the records, how to decipher the records, how to be able to know, okay, I'm going to look at the index first, then I'm going to go look at the actual film. And if the actual film is there, wonderful. If it's not, okay, where else can I find this information, type of thing. And it was really great that they started to then, of course, put things online. Okay, if you want to look at wills, then yeah, you're going to have to go to the records
Oh,
office. If you want to look at deeds, yeah, you're going to have to go to the records office. And if you want to look at other things, depending on the time frame period that you're looking for. So let's say, as an example, the 1900s, the early 1900s to the 1920s. That's another major great migration of people coming to the United States of America at that time. But they never include in that story, because it's mostly from Europe coming in. They never include that story of the Caribbean people,
yeah.
of West Indians coming to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very surprised to see all these Ellis Island records of these people.
It seems like going
And
all
I'm
the way up
going,
the coast.
wow, they came to America in the 1920s, and
Via Ellis Island?
and they would come through Ellis Island, the majority of the times, or they would go to some other um, point
Like
on the
my,
East Coast.
oh,
They would go with the trade. So usually, whether that was banana, whether that was some other produce, or something that else was done, they would go with that, and they would have they literally had first class, second class, and third class rooms that they had, but they were on pretty much a cargo ship.
do you feel like they were working their way?
No,
No. Oh, they were just passengers on
they
the
were just
actual.
passengers
Yeah.
on the actual ship itself.
Well, hell, why not?
And they
Get to
had
where
their
you
own
want to go.
rooms. So it was again, it broke one of those myths, I guess you can say, of thinking that nobody in the Caribbean traveled or went anywhere.
Right.
Like, we like to think that, we're assumed that in the Caribbean nobody traveled anywhere, nobody
Right.
went anywhere. Like, there was no movement between the islands, which is so untrue, because there was constant movement,
Mm-hmm.
whether that was through trade, whether that was through any other means. There was always movement within the Caribbean. And of course, whichever colonial power that you happen to be under as well.
You had mentioned earlier that you hit a stopping point in your maternal line. What was that roadblock? Was that lack of records?
It was partially lack of records, and just trying to find out where else could they be. Because again, I noticed around emancipation time, so that's around
Mhm.
the
18.
late 1830s, 1840s. People are like, hey, I'm not going to record myself. It wasn't mandatory. It didn't become
Oh, that's true.
mandatory until the 1880s. That's
Okay.
where things became a little bit more standardized. And sometimes you will see that, yeah, people either affiliated themselves with the church, then they, of course, went gotten baptized at that time when they were free. However, it was very challenging to find, because you might see somebody, but you don't have anybody written down for their mother or their father. It was just the
Oh,
person
okay.
saying they were born, let's say, 1860s. You know, December 1st, 1860, this is the birth, and then January 25th, 1868. is the baptism, but however, there is nobody written that is the mother or the father. So then you're lost at that point. You can't you really can't go back any further at that point.
That has to be so frustrating.
Then you're like, okay, we know that she was born, but we don't know who her parents are. And then of course it gave an idea of where people were in society as well.
Yeah.
So even though I sit here and I say, yeah, I was able to do this, and even that was a challenge. However, what I've come to see is that they were a different set of people in society, where you can say that they were kind of like the upper middle class, so to speak, because they had freedom. Because this particular line, other than that one African ancestor, everybody was free. The daughter was made free. She was made free by her father. Her children were free because her presence, her status was as a free person, and everybody born on that line was free.
Okay.
So that makes
Wow.
it completely different.
Was that contrary to what you thought you would find as far as it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Because because I'm like looking at these records, I'm like, how is it that these people are free? I thought everybody was enslaved. And that was a hard one to kind of digest and to understand, because you're like, this is so against the grain and of course this, I guess you can say, even though it's mixed race or brown status that people had, this is not talked about. Yes, they're in the records as a statistic, and they're kind of counted across to the white planter class in some regards, because most of them are children of these planters, right? So then, of course, they're going to be more aligned, but nobody talks. It's not mentioned enough of this brown class that exists, which is mixed race people.
So, at what point did it become something else, like emotional? And it had to have. You just said it was hard to
Yeah,
digest.
it's hard to
Did you
digest.
consider quitting?
No,
I'm joking.
I didn't, only because you're like, I think you're just in shock. You're just in shock at what you're reading and what you're seeing in front of you. And you're just like, okay, it's going to change. You're doing this like it's in a suspense book. And you're just like, yeah, you turn the page. Yeah, it's going to change. But it doesn't. It just gets more wild. You're just more gobsmacked more than anything else, because it's a contradiction in many ways. Because, as an example, one of these individuals, she's probably like my fifth grade aunt. So she's free. She has enslaved people that she's earning an income from. Now, she's high up in the church. She's a Baptist. These were staunch Baptists, is what I came to learn. And yet, she was, in her free time, providing a safe house, almost like an underground railroad system in Jamaica, allowing people that were running for their freedom. She provided this house where it was a stopover, I guess. And if they stayed there long enough, she taught them how to read and write. If not, they continued on their way to freedom into the mountains, into cockpit country. So reading that, I'm just like going, oh my God, now my head is getting dizzy, because she owns enslaved people. And yet she is allowing enslaved people to become free and use her home or her safe house, right, as a landing spot, and to continue their journey into the mountains.
But how did you find any more information about that? There's the emotional element of being in shock of the enslaved family members and everything, and then there's the pride of
Yes.
having this woman in your. It's how do you, and that battle between the two within one person.
Exactly. And then you have to kind of like, I looked at it like this, is that I tried to see it from her lens, because I'm sure, again, she's high in the church. If you're such a high Christian person, here you are doing something, I guess, against your faith. And in order to appease your conscience, right? You're now going to assist in these people that are held in bondage to find their freedom, and not only to find their freedom, to allow them to be illiterate, to teach them. So that's how I looked at it. I looked at it from that perspective, that she must have been fighting her own conscience in some way, shape, or form. Because how could you be someone of the church and yet you have your own movable property, which is what she had, because she was able to lease them out. But at the same time, this was what provided her living. This is what provided her to eat, to live a decent life during that time. And you just sit here and you're just, as I said, your head just swims with all of this information, but that's the only other way that you can kind of reconcile things, and
Sure.
just try to say that she must have been battling it herself as well to be able to operate in that society. And she could get away with it because she was considered to be, even though she was
Right.
mixed race, she was considered to be a white person.
Oh, she was mixed race.
She was mixed
So
race.
she could pass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So but she was considered to be, for all intents and purposes, a white person. So
Mm.
she used her power of what she had
Mhm.
to do that. She didn't marry,
I was
even though
just going to ask that.
she
Maybe
didn't
that's how
marry.
she got away with like the whole I need, help.
Exactly. And
Whatever. Yeah.
that's the other thing that you notice. It's just, these women that did not marry, that's how they retain their power.
Okay.
So it didn't have to go up to a man, right? They had children. But it was strategic in many ways, because that enabled them to keep their power, keep their decision making, keep, even though, as I said, we're in this time frame of slavery,
Yeah.
it allowed them to remain autonomous in so many ways.
I love that. Um, did you find it hard to find information on women?
I thought I was gonna, on this line, it wasn't.
Okay.
On this line, it wasn't, because they did not marry.
Kind of like wills and stuff like that.
They had, oh my gosh, I was like, these people were wheeling and dealing like nobody's business. And I I have so much reference material because they kept their power.
Okay.
They were able to negotiate things that normally a man would have done at that time. They only when, I would say, they did that for a couple of generations, and
Okay.
then they enabled their daughters, because that aunt and her sisters who I descend from,
Mhm.
she enabled her two daughters, decided who they should marry. And that's where the wealth, so to speak, comes into the family. And that's how that all works.
Through the
But
women.
it's through the women, which we do not talk about a lot in history. We don't really talk about women at all. It's like they weren't even there. Like, how
Yeah, I
are
know.
else we here?
Much less in the Caribbean.
Exactly. So to see that was just unbelievable. Yes, they owned, in order for them to retain their power, they had to own people in order to do so.
Mm.
But they made sure that they did not marry until they deemed it necessary. They decided for 2 generations not to marry. And only once she wanted to have her children, I guess, have a different experience than herself. So that's where I guess they allowed them to marry.
Did you find other documentation or any kind of news or writings or anything on this being the thing back then for women
Uh,
to do this?
Yeah, like, I guess, especially with my podcast with some of the guests, this is what their specialty is and this is what they write about. And I was very excited. Oh, great, I'm going to talk with someone that that kind of knows what I came across. Like, because
Yeah.
again, it's not something that is well enough known about this particular time frame period. But in terms of other documentation, yes, absolutely. You have to look at newspaper articles, because that gives you another robust amount of information. And then as well, you have to look at books. I
Okay.
didn't expect that books and laws that came up
Oh,
significantly for me was laws. Like, I don't know how many books I have of the legislator in Jamaica to be able to, it's called, what is it? The accounts,
Oh,
accounts and papers.
okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm looking at that book, that has like 500 pages. But
Jeez.
again, you just, this is the stuff that you end up having to look through, and you see, because it shows what happens in each parish. It shows who was the person that
Oh.
was, vestrymen who were part of the parish. You saw how much they made for the year, and you're like, yeah, 240 pounds. Wow, that's a lot of money, But again, it was a lot of money back then
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
opposed
I'm
to
sure.
now. So it just it's just really fascinating as to all the different avenues that you have to look at, all the different types of records that you have to look at. I looked at mappings because you have to look at the land, because
Yeah.
everybody's associated to the land, to the plantation.
Hmm.
And then there were these what are called manumission records, but not manumissions in regards to freedom, but these were manumission records in regards to when Haiti was having their battle for their independence in the 1790s. So that caused a lot of migration to happen to Jamaica. That's where you have to go to the library. So the
Yeah.
National Library is where I went to, as well as to the records office, as well as to the archives.
And your own podcast, to be
And
honest.
yeah,
You can have anyone you want on your podcast. You learn from your guest all this stuff that's
exactly. Oh
so
no,
great. And like you
exactly.
say, this stuff never gets talked about. And
It
so
doesn't.
to research your own and then be able to learn from these scholars, and you
Yeah.
have such great people on your podcast.
No, I'm extremely fortunate to have
Mhm.
them come on, whether
Yeah.
it is just, the scholars that are coming on, or the people that are really passionate about
Mhm.
what they're doing as cultural preservationists,
Mhm.
and people, or because they do the other side of, and that's why for my podcast, I wanted to include this as well. And these are the people that unlock the memory archive.
Yeah.
So, because they're the storytellers telling these Anansi
Yeah.
stories or anything else. They're the ones that know all the knowledge about the bush, what needs to be. Because there was always someone in the community that always knew what to take when, or which bush that you should use to boil to take in terms of what tea to drink,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
or again, in terms of the music archive, the dance archive,
Oh.
all of that is, those are things that are innate. They say we always have the beat, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
But those are the things that we have. And again, unfortunately, our ancestors were not sitting around writing stuff.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, they were being worked to death,
Yeah. The
literally.
people who were writing something were you have really good conversations on your podcast about
Yeah.
colonialism, and they're the ones who wrote our
Yeah.
history. And honestly, I have to say that it was my ancestors who that
Mhm.
came from Spain, and you have to reconcile with that too.
Exactly, exactly. So then you start to see that, oh, I come from people that they were the plantation owners. What's going
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah.
And that was a hard one. And one particular plantation owner, which was, again, it still boggles my mind when I look back at that record, because it's part of when documenting the amount of enslaved people that you had on each plantation. And he kept his children enslaved. And he sold, in this particular record, it showed that he sold his children to pay for his taxes. And
Oh
I was
God.
just like,
Oh my God.
Lord, I was
Oh,
like,
such horrible times, you
exactly.
know?
And I'm going, am I reading what I'm reading here? He sold his children. Like, you have no idea how many, it took me many months to reconcile that,
Yeah.
to know that he sold his children.
And I'm
And,
sure that was something that was done.
and,
It
and it was
probably
done,
wasn't looked at in any kind of
no, exactly. But for me to read that, and I had to
oh my
go,
God.
okay, well, remember, Wendy, this is what they had to do at that time.
Mhm.
As horrible as you are reading this is what they did, right?
Yeah. That's I would imagine, and as I go through it, I imagine that that's going to be one of the toughest things
Yeah.
is reading and trying to reconcile with uh, the times.
Yes.
And like, I don't
No,
even know how to put it. I don't even know how to put it into words because I haven't.
you can't. You will
Yeah.
never be able to put it into words, and I think that's why, for me, when I kind of prepared myself as best as I could, knowing that I was, I had to say, "Okay, Wendy, you're gonna look at some records that are gonna be quite inflammatory."
Yeah.
And I was expecting that, but I was not expecting this. And to see something like that and understand the dynamics of something like that and how that played out in the family after some generations. Just like they say, trauma passes from one generation to another. This is the same thing because he had 7 kids, and these 5 children, these were the ones that were enslaved, and 2 were not enslaved. And the 2 that weren't enslaved when he passed, they got, how would I say, they got the preferential
Yeah.
treatment, and they got the better part of this land, so to speak, this
Oh.
plantation land. And it definitely continued onwards afterwards in terms of how people were treated and how they were defined. Like, there's out of 7 kids, 5 were born into slavery
Mhm.
and
What was
2 were not.
happening politically at that time, though? That the other were the two that weren't the youngest?
They were the youngest. So this was
Okay.
after emancipation. So
Okay.
that's when they were born. So when they were born, it was free
Free.
times at that point.
Yeah.
As opposed to the others, they were born enslaved.
Yeah.
I mean, they eventually got their freedom. It's very messy. And I
Mhm.
think that's why sometimes people will make nice stories so everybody can feel good about themselves, right? Nobody wants to
Mhm.
feel a way that their ancestors did these types of things. They want to feel
Yeah.
proud. They want to feel like, yes, this is a good thing. When in reality, I'm just like looking at stuff, trying to roll my eyes and just go, oh my God.
You thought you were prepared? How would you tell another Caribbean, me, how to prepare for this? You
I
can't?
would, s- I would say definitely do a talk. Like, definitely have a talk with yourself and
Yeah.
definitely,
Okay.
as to what your limits can and cannot be, and know that, yeah, you're going to see every and anything. Unfortunately, you can kind of prepare in the sense of, that you're going to be seeing things that are quite inflammatory, but you do find a way to kind of see it from their perspective. Yes, have the moment. Have the moment, and when you see everything, acknowledge it, but find a way to resolve it and get over it, unfortunately, or
Yeah.
fortunately, in order for you to be able to move forward.
So you must have had family members telling you that the research wasn't right and that the oral history was, or, I'm just at, I shouldn't say you had to have. Did you? I guess it's more of a question. Since I'm interviewing you, it's a question. Did you? Okay.
Absolutely. Oh, no,
How did you
absolutely.
deal with that?
I was open relatively for anything and anything. I had
Mm,
no preconceived notions. I had none of that. But it was just shocking to know where people wanted to align. And that
mm,
showed me as well, okay, Wendy, this is part of their identity. So you have to as well kind of be
oh,
careful because they're taking this on as this represents them.
mhm,
Whatever that story is, it represents them. So for me to come along and start telling something that's very, very different,
mm. Oh my gosh.
you're going to be seen as the outlier and you're going against the grain. So then you are the bad person or the
Mhm,
person in the wrong because there's just no
mhm.
way. And in order for them to stay psychologically safe, because this is their
Yeah,
identity, this is what they've claimed, and this is what they're taking on to
this is what they were taught
this is what they were
generations.
taught.
I mean, that's the nature of an
Exactly. This
oral
is what they were
history.
taught. This is what they were known. Whoever might have told that to them, that is no longer here to defend what, Wendy is saying. you have to say, "Okay, you know what? Not everybody can join you on this journey. Not everybody's gonna meet you at that point in this journey. There's some people that unfortunately you will have to, okay, smile, take what they say, and move on."
Yeah, and I'm realizing that already,
Yeah.
in starting mine because, I reached out to what was in my gut, a first cousin, or I
Mhm,
I thought he's gotta be related to me, and it turns out he was a first cousin, verified by my aunt and all this stuff. So we've started talking. He's very interested in doing the family history,
mhm.
and here's why I say this. He had pointed out some things that I had never thought of that were shocking and I had to consider, and I'm just as curious as he is, so I'm not mad about it. But what I'm
Right.
saying is that I can imagine that there are those that in the family or whatever who believe a certain line
Yes.
or a certain story because
Mhm.
that's what they've been taught, or maybe they're still living in the culture. Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
so, in finding all this emotional stuff, what made you write this book?
Yeah, the emotions of researching your family tree, because the main reason is what most people that go into researching their family tree, it's supposed to be a pastime, an activity. So it's not supposed to, you're not even supposed to think about it, so to speak. You're just supposed to do it. And yeah, sure you do, but there is a huge emotional component to it that we don't talk about enough. And whether or not you are meeting family members in person, that is heavy with emotions. I think I told you about meeting that 97-year-old relative
Yeah.
and just being blown away that I'm sitting across from someone who doesn't even look 97. They could maybe pass for 67 at
Oh my
that
god,
point because, as I said, he had no
love
wrinkles.
it.
And then as you get to know people, as you get to create a safe space, a comfort, that they then feel that they can talk to you about other things as well. You see that they almost transport in another place in time because even though they're physically there, their eyes just light up. Their voice changes while they're talking. You activated something for them that they haven't been able to have, talk to somebody about this particular time, and they're like, "Yeah, Wendy, you remember back in the day?" I'm thinking, "I don't remember back in the day, but grateful that you can continue onwards with this story." But,
You let me know when you find the news article.
but,
I yeah,
'cause
I there's gotta be a lot of happy emotions too.
oh,
I mean, like what
absolutely,
you're
because
saying. Yeah.
you're just in awe, like, it normally, I'd put it like this, is the fact that there was there's always gonna be your negative Nellies type of thing,
Yeah,
right? That are, and I'm thinking if I had actually listened to those people, I wouldn't
yeah.
have had the opportunity to sit across from this gentleman that in my brain does not look like he is 97 years of age.
You just can't get past it.
I can't get past it. I still won't get past it. A man I will never, ever, ever forget because he he opened up his home and he allowed me to come in to visit. It was
Oh.
just amazing to be able to have that opportunity.
And like you and I were talking before we got, taping, that's an honor.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
an honor to hear someone talk about their life and tell their stories.
Oh, absolutely. It is, and that's why you have to be very careful as to who you're sharing things with, because I think I mentioned it before, not everybody is on the same path as you. Not everybody
Right.
sees things the way that you may see it. I know that we all look at things at a very different angle. We come with different um, experiences. However, to be able to have that opportunity, him and there was others that I had the opportunity, whether I met with them in person or I was able to speak with them on the phone, it was something I have n never experienced before. Never.
I love that, and you know how that feels intimately having a podcast, you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like,
hearing people's stories and just holding that space
mhm,
and watching them light up, you know?
exactly.
I just love that no matter what the topic is.
Exactly.
Uh,
And yeah, some of this, yeah, sure, we're talking about slavery and we're
I know.
talking about, I think there was one guest that I had on, And she's like, "Wendy, I really get really passionate." I'm like, "Yeah, so do I. I mean, I'm here invested with you as well." And we're talking about a very serious subject, and yet we're smiling. We're smiling away
Mhm.
because it means it comes from a different place for us, right? So it becomes more intimate because, especially when you've been with a story, not necessarily a story, but a history, a time and a place, and you've carried it for so long, it becomes like a child, and you birth it once you start talking about it.
Mm, that's a good way to put it. And, you and I are both interested in history. It must be a little disappointing when somebody is like, oh, that's the past. Because I have heard that before about,
Yeah,
why research your family history if it's, the past.
yeah, but I look at it like this is they are at a different level, and that's fine. If they wanna have the conversation, fine, you can have the conversation, but we're not here to convert anybody, right? We're we're
Right.
we're not we're not in church, right? We're not in church,
Right.
and we're not a politician. We
Right.
are looking for like-minded people that want to know, and that's where this audience is gonna be from, right? We're not gonna hit anybody over the head to say, "Yeah, you need to know," and this no, no. You
This
have
needs to be everybody's thing. Yeah. No.
eh, that's why it's such a personal decision for
Yeah.
someone to be able to further go down the road of self-discovery, of researching and
Mhm.
finding and taking the time because it is a lot of time, but it brings so much reward as well.
Now, you told me one time that a lot of your family members ask you for the story.
I was doing presentations for
Yeah.
people,
I just love
and
that.
it's for this one particular family, it was the fact that their father had just passed. So then that gave them the
Mm.
opening to then start asking questions because their father, due to, again, a hurt, a trauma, was not and did not their entire lives talk about his life in Jamaica. Yes, he acknowledged that he came from Jamaica. That was
Mhm.
it. There was no other discussions from what I understand. And so for me, it was a real honor to sit there
Mhm.
and to be able to present and show records and give them the, I guess, a bit of a comfort to know that, yes, when they saw that last name, when they did go to Jamaica, yes, they are connected to that family. And
Oh,
it gave them, I guess, a closure in many ways
sure.
that their father unfortunately could not. Not that it takes away from his story because it doesn't.
It's gotta be so, uplifting,
Mm,
very satisfying to be able to give your family that.
absolutely, absolutely. It I would say it pours into you in a different type of way because this means more than what you would ever manage to know for these other people to be able to hear this,
Oh.
right? At least they didn't think that it was a made up story.
Right.
Didn't think that, oh, did that really happen? I met that person. Was I really related to them? You know, it it brings a lot of closure.
So how do you feel like this has changed you from where you were before you started your family research until now? Do you feel like it has given you some kind of a shift in your outlook or yeah.
Absolutely, because you look at things a little bit different. It does change your outlook for sure, because now when you're having conversations with people, you're more mindful of what
Mm,
is being said. You know that words, even though we may think it doesn't carry anything, it carries a ton of weight to people. And you
yeah.
don't know what your, exuberance will do for somebody else, or your positivity will do for somebody else, or your
Yeah.
negativity will
Yeah.
do or have impactful to somebody else. I think that is realizing that your words have major impact to people, and it does change how you look at things. Like, things are not black and white. There's a
Right.
lot of gray in there, a lot of gray, and you can't just take things at face value. You just notice that things have to be taken a little bit more than just surface level.
Yeah,
And
I mean, you can find 10 marriage records for one
yeah,
person.
exactly.
um, but there's still a human being behind that story,
Exactly.
you
Always.
know? A human being
Always.
behind that story in the 1700s, you know?
It's I would say it's very humbling. It's a very humbling experience, and it gives you a sense of you know who you are. So then nobody can you're not you're not easily moved by anybody with what they say. So if it's a negativity, it just rolls off. I don't even register it. I just continue onwards.
You are nominated for a Women's Podcasting Award in the history section.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's going on until I think the end of
Yes.
April.
Yes. Voting started on April 1st and
Mhm.
ends on April 30th.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think I think you got it in the bag.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Don't call anything. Don't call anything yet until. I mean, it's just one of those things that again wasn't expecting. You know, you do something because you do it from
Oh, yeah.
something that's driving you to do it, right? And it's great to get accolades, so to speak,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It's
it
really great
is.
to get it because as you know, there's a lot of work that goes behind getting a podcast out there.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this often. It's I don't I think I think I said it to you. It's like everybody just thinks it's a fun conversation, you know.
No, there's a lot
No.
more. There's a
There's a
lot
lot more. Well, especially the way that you and I do it is there's a lot of
more.
research and there's a,
Yeah,
just don't want to go in cold. Um and yeah, it's and there's so much time put into editing and all that stuff. So, what keeps you going?
listen, I would definitely would say it is the love of the history of it and the love of pretty much reconnecting back to what I had uncovered and having those again, having these different types of conversations. You're allowing somebody else to reveal something that they've hold very close to their chest as well.
Right.
Right? I sit back and I listen back to them, of course, when you're editing, and then afterwards, it just replays in your mind. You're like, "Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Maybe I shouldn't have been so, stuck in the mud. I can look at it a different way."
Mhm.
I get a lot of energy from it for sure.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
There's there's a love of it. There's a
Yeah.
passion. It's not like I'm making millions doing this.
No, no.
Not
No,
at all.
absolutely. Absolutely
No,
not.
it's just a love of it, and it's just a I think you and I both have just this undying curiosity
Yeah.
too, and lifelong student outlook on life, and, that's where the love of this comes in, and I don't expect to win any awards, but, like we're saying, it's nice to get the nomination,
Yeah.
it's nice to get, yeah, it's
Exactly,
great.
because I know I think you're as well nominated as well in the
Yes.
cultural section, right,
Yeah,
as well?
society and culture, yeah. Ah!
Mm. Which is good, which is good.
It's great. I mean, it feels great, I'm new at this, and so
Mhm.
there's no expectation, but, it 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 does fuel the excitement. It fuels
Mhm.
the, satisfaction.
Yes.
Uh, you know, you should be proud of what you do. There's a lack of women's voices,
Yeah.
um, in maybe not podcasting in general, but Caribbean history for sure. You should be proud. I just really, really appreciate your podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm so looking forward to reading your book as
Yes.
I venture into this journey. When can we expect it to be out, or is it out?
No, not out yet. It's out, I think it's scheduled on the 19th or the 20th of this month.
Okay. Okay. So, everybody,
Yes.
I'll let you know on my
Yeah.
socials. Good luck to you with the book.
Mhm.
I am looking forward to it very much. And good luck with the awards. I voted
Yes,
for you.
and you too. Absolutely. Absolutely, you too as well, because
Great.
again, it's as you said, there's not a lot of podcasts that are in this area,
Mhm,
and as well with women as being the
mhm.
lead in the front, so to speak, to be able
Yeah,
to for women in podcasting because it is a male dominated
it is.
venue.
Yeah, it for sure is. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
on to Tradition Cafe. I'm so glad that you pulled up a seat to the table.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait to talk to you again.
Yes.
Everybody, she has become my mentor. Anyway, good luck. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Anna. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for me coming on. Thank you.
The project is made possible through the generous support of our sponsors who believe in the power of art and community. Digifly is a grassroots, homegrown digital flyer distribution company made by locals for locals. Think of it as an electronic community billboard. Digifly's screens are all over the East Bay and seen by over 150,000 locals monthly. You'll see digital flyers for East Bay restaurants, retail shops, comedy clubs, art shows, museums, concerts, all the things that make the East Bay such a great place to live. Whether you are trying to get the word out about your business or upcoming event, or you're just looking for something fun to do this weekend, you need to check Digifly. Visit digifly.com to learn more and find local events. Art Push is an artist-run nonprofit that supports artists by creating exhibitions, workshops, and community events, making sure art is seen, shared, and experienced behind the gallery walls. Visit my website at traditioncafe.com. You can also reach out to me at anna@traditioncafe.com. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, but you can watch us on YouTube.